What's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today I have a new tutorial where we're going to revisit a concept that we've explored some on the channel. It's Aux Tracks, buses, and synths revisited for 2018. The reason why we're going to cover it in more depth in this video is because some of you have really picked up on this concept. I use it frequently, lots in my sessions, in my templates. I've showed it to you in the courses and in the videos. It's very powerful, and there's obvious reasons for using it, but it's not so obvious in terms of setting it up, and some of you are just still not clear on it. So if you already understand this concept, go ahead and skip the video. For those of you that are still confused with this is a very important concept in terms of taking your mixing to the next level. So let's go ahead and jump in. The first thing we need to talk about is inputs and outputs. So very basic sort of concept in mixing, but it's just basically saying on this channel, we have our input and then we have an output, which is where we're sending the signal ultimately after it's processed. By default, most of the channels in your mixer are going to be routed to the stereo output, stereo bus commonly referred to, or the master bus. So for instance, right now, this track, which is our verse vocal, is routed to the stereo output. So if I press play, you can simply solo your channel and see where that's ultimately landing. And you can see it's just going straight to the output after it's being processed with auto-tune. So what I did in the actual mix and what I do with 99% of my mixes and my vocals is I build a vocal chain on what's called an auxiliary track. And that's what these yellow channels are. So what is an auxiliary track? All it is just a extra channel that you're adding to the mixer where you're processing maybe just one track, but most of the time you're processing multiple channels through this same auxiliary track. And then once the auxiliary track processes things with the inserts, then you can even route that output to something different. And most of the time I'm routing my aux tracks straight to the stereo bus. So we got the processing happening on the aux track, or the auxiliary track, and then it goes to the output. So let me show you how this works. What I'm going to do is for our verse vocal, I'm going to route the output, not the send. We're going to talk about sends in a minute, but we're going to do the actual output of the signal, the entire signal. We're going to route it to a bus. Now, which bus are we going to route it to? Let's just say for example purposes, we didn't have any of these already set up. So I'm going to just route it to an empty bus, something I haven't used yet. So I'm going to go to bus 10, and I'm going to route the input to the bus that we just created. So that's bus 10. So what that's doing is it's saying the bus is just signifying what path we're taking, and then ultimately that's where we're going to arrive, or what aux track we're going to arrive at. So bus 10, it's taking the signal, it's going over to bus 10, and then we're arriving here, the bus 10 input, onto this auxiliary track, which is our verse aux I have set up. So now that that's done, this is what happens.
You never leave, every breath I breathe reminds me that you never fail. You drew me close.
So you can see the signal is coming into a few tracks here. One you probably saw was the reverb. I'm going to talk about how that's set up in a minute with sends. But for now, you see, again, the signal is going out bus 10. It's arriving. It's being processed through these inserts on our auxiliary track. And then we've got the send going to the reverb. But go down here, and the output of the aux track is the stereo out. So it then goes to the output itself. So again, as I've stated before, one of the most useful reasons for why to do these aux tracks like this is so that you can reuse your chains that you've built on the auxes. So a lot of you would probably record your verses on separate tracks. So this one was on the same track, but let's just say that we had verse 2 and then verse 3. They were all on different tracks. So let me just name these. This is verse 2. This is verse 3, and this is verse 1. Okay, so once those are there, again, by default, all these would be just going to the stereo output of the stereo bus, right? But since we've got these 3 tracks that they were recorded with the same equipment, same thing, you want to run them through the same vocal chain. There's no reason to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plugins as inserts on these individual audio tracks when we can just run them from a bus to the same aux track and hit this same chain here. So I'm just going to select all these, and then we're just going to route the output to this aux track. And then those are all utilizing that great, beautiful vocal chain that I have set up for the verses. Now let's talk about sends, because this is something that I think a lot of you are confusing the send and the output. And the send is controlling how much of this signal that we're sending post pan or post fader. I have it post pan. So what post pan means is that based on where this pan is set, it will send that signal after the pan happens. So if I had it all the way to the left, it's going to send a left pan signal to wherever we route that bus to. But I have it on post pan. So what's happening is we're saying not only do we have the entire signal being routed to the stereo output, but we also want to additionally send this signal to another aux to be processed via bus 4. So if we go into our buses here for this send, it's going to bus 4 and it's arriving at hook verb, which is this track right here. This is where our reverb is happening. So this control over here on the send is controlling how much of the signal we're sending to that aux. Okay, so watch this. If I turn this all the way down,
You never leave. Every breath I breathe reminds me that you never.
it's dry, no reverb. So now what we're going to do is we're going to slowly bring this up and watch this aux track, the hook verb aux track.
You never leave. Every breath I breathe reminds me that you never fail. You drew me close even when I chose.
So we're just controlling how much of the signal we're sending to that aux track. So that's how a send works. And you can use as many of these sends as you need to. So let's say we wanted to send to another aux. We could create another send. So basically we're just duplicating this signal and sending it out to different destinations and arriving on these different aux tracks. So it's really powerful because you can, again, reuse signals. You can reuse aux tracks. You can reuse buses. And again, it just makes things a lot more efficient. So speaking of reverbs, a lot of you are overusing the reverb, not in terms of how it's actually being mixed, but you're just using a bunch of different reverb plugins all over your actual channels instead of just utilizing a reverb that's on an aux. So what do I mean by this? The same reverb that we talked about that's on this aux is hook verb. Let's just say, for example, this was not necessarily a reverb that was just for the hook, but let's just say this was like our big verb that we had set up. I can reuse this reverb on any of my channels. So let's just say that for our rap verse, let's go over here to the rap verse, which is right over here. And it's already routed, I believe, to, it's going to bus 8. So yeah, it's already got its own kind of delay and reverb, but let's just say that we want to go to that same reverb that we were talking about, the big verb. All I need to do is just get a send, use a bus that's going to the big verb, which is bus 4. So I'm going to do that. And so right now, with it all the way down, there's no reverb.
Help me to see how you tossed on my sin to see.
So now I'm going to send the signal to the same reverb that we're using for our sung verse by Danielle.
Help me to see how you tossed on my sin to see. Every day I'm reminded of how I've been binded is hard.
So right there, I'm utilizing the same reverb for a couple of different channels and tracks and even performers. So I don't have to keep slapping a bunch of reverb plugins onto the individual inserts for the track itself, before you know it, reverb and delays like that are going to bog down your sessions. And a lot of you that are complaining about not having a fast enough computer, you actually have a fast enough machine. It's just you're not utilizing these aux tracks with reverbs especially, and your computer is just not able to handle it. My computer wouldn't be able to handle that either. That's why I utilize these aux tracks so much. There's so many different advantages to this. Another thing let's talk about is, for instance, like your instrumental track. What I have is I've created an aux track for my instrumental, and I've routed all of the instrument tracks. So that's all this stuff. You see, it's the output is actually bus 1. So if you look at all the things that are routed to bus 1 and you go down here, that's all on a single aux. So what that means is I can control my instrumental on this one fader.
You never leave. Every breath I breathe reminds me that you never.
I can solo it, I can mute it, I can control things. So I hope that this explanation and letting you hear and see the routing of it in action is going to help y'all understand this even better. If you still have questions about it, of course, leave a comment below. And you got to practice this, y'all. You got to get into your mixer and experiment with the way you're doing your routings. But ultimately, if you can just understand the aux track and then the output, getting the output going through a bus to an aux, practice that and get that set up, and then that's going to help you understand a lot of this other routing in terms of busing and sends. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing, and we'll talk to you soon.
The wander from you seems unfair.